Sports. My name is David Wolding, and today we're going to be talking about the second half of the Mizzou season and how Mizzou fans might be pessimistic towards this football team. However, before we do that, please remember to hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel. Check out our Facebook and Instagram pages. Now, Eric and I are doing a two-part series on how fans should look at the rest of this season with Vanderbilt homecoming coming up. Eric is covering the positive side of things, and I'm covering the pessimistic side of things. So let's dig right into some of these things here. And I'm going to start right up front with the Mizzou offensive line. They have not been great. A lot of people can obviously see that. They've seemed to have made adjustments and are starting to gel together, but they're still getting blown up. They're still making all kinds of mistakes, having false starts, a lot of holding calls, and just the experience, the lack of discipline with the offensive line and the team in general, and the inexperience that you have coming from like Connor Towson as their snapper and some of the other guys who just don't have much game experience and development time because they're thrown right in there due to necessity. Mizzou on the season is rushing 165 yards per game. Not the greatest, not the worst in the SEC, but they're in the bottom half for sure, rushing on the passing side of things. While the pass block has been somewhat okay, the last couple of games especially, Cook hasn't had a lot of time to move around back there. He's had to rush his throws, look around, mainly run for his life because the line hasn't been doing a stellar job. Offensively, for passing, especially, they only have 208 passing yards per game, which I believe is dead last in the SEC. Now, in order to have a good offense, you have to have a good balance. But because we can't pass the ball, the team is really struggling on offense. Continuing to trend with the struggle on offense. Their scoring is averaging they're averaging 25.17 points per game, which is bottom three, with Texas A&M behind them and Auburn behind them in scoring offense. So Mizzou's just not putting points on the board, and quite honestly, it's losing the games for them. Continuing this offensive trend, another thing we can take a look at is our quarterback play. Brady Cook is what we expected him to be, a game manager. However, he hasn't been a solid one. QB rating and everything else has him around 65th in the nation, which is below average. And quite honestly, he hasn't been doing well. Anybody who has been watching the games can see he struggles from time to time with consistency with the passing, especially on the deeper balls. If you take a look at the Florida game, he had a pick six against them, and he threw another interception late in the game. He is the reason why we weren't able to win that game, quite honestly. And if Mizzou falls behind even a little bit, they're going to be in trouble because he's not a big game playmaker. He just does his job trying to manage the game without turning the ball over. And lately, he's been starting to turn over the ball, which is really concerning for this team. Some other concerns, Luther Burden, the standout freshman who's supposed to be a huge star, has been struggling. And some of that has to do with he has a high ankle sprain, which is really, really hard to overcome throughout the season, especially when you're not resting and you're still playing games. You can see him limping on the sidelines. It's just a struggle for him to get out there and produce the way he should be able to, or could be able to produce. Dominic Lovett, our number one wide receiver, and really probably the most dynamic player on the field before he got injured. Some of our other receivers, even Barrett Bannister, is banged up. Because of that, this offense, I think, is going to be struggling all season to put up points on the board. And it could be a cause for concern, especially when you're trying to win, because the schedule, folks, is still not easy to finish out the season, even though we got through Georgia, Florida, and some of those guys. We still have Tennessee, who's undefeated, Kentucky only has one loss. South Carolina knocked off Kentucky, so they're no slouch. And then Arkansas is always a tough battle. Just putting up points on the board is going to be a real struggle. Finally, one of the last things I want to talk about our offense, and I have mentioned it earlier with Brady Cook's quarterback play, but the quarterback situation in general. What does Drinkwitz do the second half of the season? Obviously, Brady Cook is not going to be the answer long term for this team. So, does he give some of the other guys a chance? Over the bye week, he mentioned that the players have to earn their time on the field through practice, which kind of indicates to me that he's not really interested in throwing a new guy out there. I mean, read it how you will, but that's kind of how it came off to me. Also, at the same time, though, he said he's not opposed to putting some of those guys in for a series if they earn it in practice. So even though we don't know what's going on in practice, and everyone wants to see Sam Horn out there, we don't know what he's doing behind the scenes, how ready he is. Some of the things people tend to forget is he came in right at fall camp, so he hasn't had time to learn the system, which is part of the reason why I don't think he has been in there at all. With this bye week, it might give Drink a chance to reassess where he's at with the offense, because he doesn't want to put someone out there he doesn't think can take this team down the field. But this is where the pessimism comes in, is if he doesn't have anybody else to throw in there, what do you do for the rest of the season? I think this also shows in Drink's play calling too, not only with the quarterback play, but the offensive line play. His hands are kind of tied because there's not a lot of time back there for plays to develop and do the things he wants to do with misdirection. Just because the line's getting blown up because they're young and underdeveloped. And then you have a quarterback who has major struggles throwing downfield. I saw a stat that we're like third from the bottom in completing deep passes, which is considered 20 yards or more downfield. Because of that, it causes major offensive struggles, and nobody wants to play for a quarterback who can't get them the ball. If I look at the defensive side of the ball, I think my biggest pessimistic comments towards the defense is really not the defense's fault, but the offense has to give defense time to rest and has to keep them off the field and has to give them some type of support so they're not always fighting for their life on every down. Saw it in the Georgia game. Fought for 3 quarters and then collapsed at the end just because there's so much pressure to keep the other team out of the end zone, and your offense wasn't giving you any support to give a little room to breathe, a little cushion on top of maybe eating up some of that clock. Same thing against Florida. Mizzou gave up a late touchdown. Again, had no backing from the offense to give them some breathing room in a really, really close game. So my biggest concern there will just be the offense eating up time, especially in the second half of the game. Is when teams really start taking over against Mizzou, mainly because the offense isn't moving the ball and the defense is out there for long periods of time after teams have made adjustments and started running against them. Florida kind of showed the outside run against Mizzou, and Mizzou really struggled to stop some of those outside runs. And because of that, they started eating more clock in the second half and making our defense tired. I could see other teams would probably see that on the game field, notice it, and start trying to run to the outside. So Mizzou's going to have some things they need to correct and fix up in order to maintain the strong defense they've had so far at the beginning of this season. My final thought with pessimism on the Mizzou side is, before I take a look at the upcoming games for the second half of the season, is the coaching of Drinkwitz. Let's face it, I know he has some deficits, especially on the offensive side of the ball. However, he seems to be very stubborn and set in his ways, especially with his play calling. I'm quite ready to see a true offensive coordinator and let him take over as a head coach. As a head coach, you have so many things on your plate. You don't need to be calling the offenses. There are times he shows some brilliance with our offense, and there are times you just scratching your head like, why is he doing that? Uh, I think in order to get where we need to go, Drinkowitz will in the offseason needs to evaluate and maybe look at bringing in an offensive coordinator uh, to take the pressure off him, and he can focus on getting the team ready and disciplined and where they need to be for each game. Until that happens, we're going to see the same type of play calling we've had all year. He's been very conservative. Hasn't been able to mix things up, and again, some of that is I think he's too close to it. He just needs to step away and let someone else take control of the offense. Um, I also think his pride might be getting in the way, especially now that we know we might be struggling for a bowl game this year. You got to get some of your other quarterbacks in, not necessarily for the whole game, but you have to be able to get them into the game and get them some game reps to see what you have, especially the 4-star Stam Horn. You have to give these young guys a shot. They're the future of the organization. For Mizzou to even have an inkling of promise for next year, I personally think they need to get Horn and Macon in there just to see what they have. Finally, just to talk a little bit about the leftover games this season. And maybe how things could go south real quick for Mizzou. You have Vanderbilt coming up on October 22nd. This is one of the games I'm talking about where you might be able to get one of your other quarterbacks in for a couple series. Vanderbilt's not a real strong team. I think it's a winnable game for Mizzou. However, Mizzou has shown this year they find ways to lose. After that game, they play South Carolina on the road. It's going to be a tough environment on the road against South Carolina. Again, I think that's a winnable game. That might be one of the ones where if Mizzou wins, I could see us getting the 5 wins this season. Again, on November 5th, Kentucky comes to Mizzou. Kind of reminds me of the Kansas State game, except it's at Mizzou. I mean, not real stellar offense, but a solid offense can get the job done. Real disciplined football team. If Mizzou doesn't fix their penalties, they could easily lose that one. Kentucky's 19th in the country. It's going to be a struggle. Then Mizzou goes to Tennessee with Heupel's high-powered offense. With the lack of offense Mizzou is showing, I just don't see him being able to stay with Tennessee. It's in Tennessee after what they did to Alabama. I think that one they're just going to run Mizzou out of the building, quite honestly. New Mexico State comes to Mizzou. That's a very winnable game. They're kind of like Louisiana Tech, in my opinion. That would be a real good game to see how well our backups do if you can get them in. And then the Arkansas game, I think, is a winnable game. But again, you have to take care of the ball, have to have good quarterback play and good line play in order for them to win. The defense is going to give you a chance in every one of these games, except maybe Tennessee. It all comes down to the discipline of the offense and quarterback play. Like I said, if the team ends the season with 4 or 5 wins, I think they could be in trouble in the transfer portal, especially if they don't even play Sam Horner and get him into any of these games. I'm sure Eric said this on the positive side. This is like worst case scenario, I'm thinking. However, I think Mizzou has a shot to maybe get 5, potentially 6 quarterbacks. I do think Drink will get Sam Horn in there eventually, or Tyler Macon, or maybe both. It just depends on our line play. You don't want to get a freshman killed back there with Sam Horn when the line is struggling to block anybody, especially someone who's still fresh in the system trying to learn the offense. But with the remainder of the season coming up, we're just going to have to sit back, watch, see what happens, and hopefully Mizzou can find a way to pull a bowl game. There's still a path to it, but it's getting harder and harder to walk that path, if you will. Other than that, that's all I have for Underyard Sports. Stay tuned as Eric and I will preview all the remaining games each week. Stay tuned, and hopefully we can see some good results by the end of the season. Thanks for watching.